everybody, and welcome to this coffee chat. My name is Saini, and I have the honor of serving Dalhousie University as its 12th president. Thank you so much for joining us today. As we begin today's event, I would like to acknowledge that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. We also recognize that African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki, which is known as Nova Scotia, and they have done so for over 400 years. It is truly my pleasure to host today's event. As I said, I am president of Dalhousie, and I have been in this position since January 2020. And as you know very well, the past 2 years have been unprecedented. I would like to express my sincere thanks to the exceptional support that we have received. It is clear to me that Dalhousie has a strong network of friends and supporters, without whom our success would not be possible. This network extends around the globe with close to 150,000 alumni living in 150 countries. Thank you for your help and encouragement during these particularly challenging circumstances and beyond. Over our 200 years of history, we have evolved to include new faculties, new departments, and new campuses. Yet, for all of our growth, we remain a community united by shared pride in what we achieve together and what we give back to the world around us. This is truer today than it has ever been before. Last year, we launched Dalhousie University's new strategic plan, which is titled Third Century Promise. This plan was informed by extensive engagement with our communities and will shape our collective path forward. It is a promise of collective ambition, of community and support, and of the long-term positive impact Dalhousie will have on Nova Scotia, Canada, and the world. I look forward to working with all of you to write the next chapter of Dalhousie's compelling story. With your help, we will raise our ambitions boldly higher and take this great university to next level. I am delighted to be joined by two highly accomplished co-panelists today, both of them alumni of Dalhousie. Please join me in welcoming them. Let me introduce them. First, Cindy Jensen. Cindy is an executive coach and founder of INPOWER, a consulting firm that is focused on building organizational leadership. She is also the co-founder of JT Coaching Certification, a company that offers International Coaching Federation accredited coaching certification programs. Cindy spent 10 years working with PepsiCo Foods in various roles in the senior leadership team. She later joined Thales Mobility as National Accounts Manager, overseeing the company's 2 largest retail corporate accounts. Cindy is a very active community member. She is a former board of director member for Educating Girls of Rural China, a charitable foundation that's dedicated to helping young women from rural areas of Western China to obtain an education. She's currently also a corporate strategy advisor for Business for a Better Society. Among her many volunteer roles, Cindy also serves as a board member for the Dalhousie Alumni Association. She has a Bachelor of Commerce degree from Dalhousie University and an International EMBA from Rutgers University in the United States. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you.
And our next panelist, second panelist with me, is Andrew Kamm, who is a strategic and empowering leader who has successfully served in a number of roles at hospitality, entertainment, and property development companies in mainland China and Hong Kong. Currently, Andrew is serving as advisor to the AoYuan group, assisting with land acquisitions and to design, build, and manage leisure and recreational properties. Previously, he served as president of the China Cultural Tourism Group, where he was in charge of the company's expansion into development and management of theme park and leisure destinations across China and internationally. Andrew also served as Senior Vice President of the Beijing Wanda Cultural Industry Group, where he oversaw Wanda's theme park investments, and as an executive vice president and managing director of Hong Kong Disneyland, where he oversaw the transformation of the resort from its very infancy to one of Asia's premier destinations. Andrew is also a Dalhousie grad, in fact, two-time Dalhousie graduate. And he did his Bachelor of Commerce degree in 1984 from the Faculty of Management, where he then again did an MBA as part of the class of 85. Andrew, welcome to our coffee chat today. It is a pleasure to have both of you with us. And now we will begin our conversation, which is focused on leadership. What leadership means, what does it mean to be a leader, how experiences can help us to leverage and strengthen our leadership styles, and how to emerge from challenging circumstances such as the ones we are facing today in a stronger position than when we entered them. So let's get started. Cindy and Andrew, let me begin by posing you a question that, I think about it that at the best of times, let alone in more difficult circumstances like what we're facing today, leadership roles can be quite stressful, they can be challenging and yet rewarding. In my experience, we also learn the most about ourselves as we need to stretch and adapt under these difficult circumstances. So let me ask you both, and perhaps I can start with you, Cindy, that, tell me what experiences from your past were most instrumental in preparing you for what we are facing today. And in fact, what you have faced, I'm sure at many occasions in your career. What were those learnings that you brought to your leadership roles and that have made you so successful?
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. And it's funny because as I was thinking about this evening, I got very much in a reflective mode and started really reminiscing about my time at Dalhousie. And I think also when I started to think about my own leadership journey and some of the things that really impacted me around the challenging times. So I was lucky because I don't know if lucky is a good word, but when I worked with PepsiCo and Telus Mobility, we had acquired in both companies, we had acquired another business. And I think for me, that was a great opportunity to get some experience around what it means when you're going through a lot of organizational change, both from a strategic standpoint, from an execution standpoint, and how you engage the people. And the other thing that I found is just the opportunities as I went through my career, where leadership really extended a lot of opportunity, especially early in my career, for me to stretch and grow. So I think it brought quite a bit of resiliency, but I have to tell you, probably the best learning experience was when the pandemic hit. I had just actually started JT coaching certification. So this new company, and then COVID hit. And I think really what it enabled me to sort of draw on a lot of those experiences, really rethink what was our new business model, how were we going to sort of strategically move forward. And one of the things that we were not forced to do is we had to think about, how do we start working with, we had a cohort in place and everybody had sort of kind of left China and moved abroad. So we immediately executed what was supposed to be a 2-year plan within 6 weeks. And that was basically moving to online. So I think what it happens is you draw on those experiences and you just kind of become very focused and say, what do I need to do at this moment to kind of move forward given what was happening? So that's just a few kind of anecdotes.
That's good to hear that you brought your background to bear on your current roles. And Andrew, you've probably done similar things. Tell us more about your experiences. What prepared you for your leadership roles?
Well, I think, sorry. Thank you, Dr. Saini. I'm not going to repeat what Cindy said. I think those are really, really great points. What I will probably build on and add is the actual hands-on leadership experience that when you actually are confronted with challenges that you need to resolve and lead your people to go through the crisis. I think those are the kind of experience I think will really make a person grow. And I'll say Dalhousie probably cornered the market of Coca-Cola and PepsiCo, because Cindy worked in PepsiCo before, and I was actually working for Coca-Cola for 20 years in China. And I remember when I started with Coca-Cola, we were building up our businesses in China. We entered the market in 1978, when Coke re-entered, the China market again, after absence of almost, 40 years. And it was a really interesting time, because for me as a young manager at, Coca-Cola, we were tasked to build up, the whole marketing operations and distribution systems. And at that time, during the 80s, there was nothing, exists, in terms of any infrastructure, to support, consumer products, in China. As a young manager, you just, what the organization expect you to do actually were a lot. Honestly, I think, we were really underpaid, coming to think about that. Because not only that we need to do all the groundwork, but most importantly, we need to inspire, others, people who work or leaders, local leaders who work in the state-owned enterprises, that engage them, really communicate with them and work with them to build step by step, the whole businesses from the ground up. And I said, it was a really valuable experience, because not only that you need to overcome cultural barriers, but you also need to overcome a lot of practical, issues that there are certain ways that Coca-Cola will do their business, and obviously how do you understand those practices, the value, beliefs, and then in a way translate them into something that people understand back in those days. So that sort of practical experiences, I think those are really priceless. And something that when I was studying at Dell, particularly in organization management, we always talk about leadership. And and I got to say, as a young graduate back then, I really don't get what leadership actually was, because it is actually a very abstract concept to someone who hasn't really done anything before. But once you have the opportunity to do something that you never that you never do before, and you have to motivate others, to follow you or to listen to you, that I think beginning to sort of makes you understand what leadership is. Leadership is about how do you engage people? How do you make people, believe in what you told them, what you said, share your value, and leading them and inspire them. And these are the sort of practical stuff that that you learn, along the way.
Interesting, background. And one thing that caught my attention was that you used the word young 3 times, and I'm quite intrigued by that and the association with 2 colas, Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Both of you have been in leadership roles for a very long time, and yet you look like you have barely started in your career. You look so young, both of you. So there's got to be something in that formula of Coke and Pepsi. Maybe the background in Dalhousie. But listen, you spoke about experiences, but there is the other aspect of leadership that prepares us for a given situation. That's the people we work with, people we meet. And I look back at my life, and I'm so grateful for having had mentors and people who inspired me at various stages of my life, including very early on my dad, and then a string of people after that. And these days, I've just actually finished reading a book by David Johnston, Canada's former Governor General, who just recently finished his 7 years as Governor General, and is my former boss. When I was at University of Waterloo, he was the president there. And he's written this book, fascinating book, Trust. The title is Trust, How to Build a Better Country. 20 Ways to Build a Better Country, sorry. And if you can get a copy of this, it's actually worth reading. Fascinating book. Okay. And I've found a lot of inspiration in that book. And as I have found, by spending time with David Johnston, he's one of my mentors. You must have people like that in your background who inspired you, who passively or actively taught you what has come in handy during your journey as leaders. Would you like to share some of that with the audience? How about you, Andrew? Let's start with you.
Well, there were actually plenty. I'll say, plenty of leaders, that obviously, several, pay grade above me, including, I think, there were a few people that, impacted me the most. I would say, number one, as a young manager, when I first, joined the Coca-Cola organization, it was, it was our division president, someone that, who actually worked and, lived in Asia for a very long time. And what I actually, learned from him is, commitment, that being a committed leader. He is a perfect, textbook example of someone that not only committed to his work, to the company, but also, walk the talk and really set a lot of great, personal examples to us, which I think, learn a lot from him. And other, leaders that I met through the, system, what I found is that, you actually can learn different aspects from different people. I learned something from him, from our division presidents. Obviously, he's the boss of my boss of my boss. But I also learned a lot, from, people who work in the bottling plant. And, the bottling plant manager, the general manager, the sales manager, operations manager, or even, at the very, the first level supervision level, route supervisors. You can actually learn a lot of different things from a lot of different people. Every leader, I would say, carries a different sort of aspect that you can learn from. Whether, it's in, as I said earlier, commitment to work. Secondly, loyalty. I think, that's something that, again, you learn. I was in, marketing role, and I obviously work with a lot of senior marketing executive in the company. And the kind of, belief, that they sort of exemplify in terms of believing in the company, believing in the brand, believing in the people, sum up, loyalty, something that you really, need to, sort of, focus on, when you lead people, and trust, as you said, how do you engage, different people, when you do, the people who you do business with. When I was at the mid-level, management, I remember, people used to call me Mr. Coca-Cola. Obviously, I'm not Mr. Coca-Cola, but they would say, "Hey, Mr. Coca-Cola." So that when you're out there, not only that you are representing yourself, but you're also representing the company, and you have to act like it. So naturally, you need to develop that sort of a loyalty, to the brand and to the company. And I think these are all the things that I learned, when I was going through this different stage of my career. And I can share more, but I think but the key point is you can really learn different things from different people, as long as you keep your eyes open.
Yeah, and Cindy.
Yeah, you had mentioned, as you were sort of framing the question about your dad, and for sure, I would have to say, if you were to look at me today as a leader and you say, who's impacted you the most? I have to start with my dad, because I grew up in a very small town in New Brunswick, and it was a house full of all girls. So I had 3 sisters. And one of the things about my dad, he instilled so much confidence. And, as a young person, and you're like, I don't know if I can do that. He had such a belief in us and our capability and what we were able to achieve in life and so on. And the other thing too, he was such a great role model. He passed away 7 years ago, but he really gave back to the community. And there was some really important values, I think, that stayed with me. And it's interesting because as I moved into my professional career, I would call him on a regular basis. I would share with him what I was doing. And I loved getting his perspective because it was so fresh. It was so different. He would challenge me in a really encouraging way. And so I think it kind of gave me the belief in myself, which I think is really important as you're kind of, moving into the corporate life. And then I think the other thing that really influenced me, and this was in particular earlier in my career, it was the leaders who really had, so what I found is I moved into roles and jobs, probably they were a real stretch for me, as probably weren't fully capable and ready. And I think upon reflection, these leaders had so much confidence in me and what I could aspire to do. And I think what that really did is started to get me ready for the more challenging roles that I took on sort of later on. And they weren't even formal mentors. They were just leaders that took the time to really kind of counsel, coach, and support me. The other thing I would say that it had really influenced me is I think now, and it was really early in my career, probably in my 30s, the idea of paying it forward. I just felt it was, when I look at how people had extended time and the space for me to help me grow professionally, I felt it's just so important for paying it forward. And if I look at this point right now in my career, I am in awe of the younger leadership, people early in their leadership. And I just think, wow, they're so much wiser than we were at that point in our careers. So I think there's almost like a 360 of inspiration, as I look at what has impacted me and how I'm showing up today. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that we are, such a product of those interactions that we pace. You know, you're talking about your dad, and I felt that I think your dad and my dad would have enjoyed meeting each other. And so it's really interesting how, you know, these inspiring dads that we have, how much is there common between them. You know, something you said resonated with me, the idea of stretch, that, you know, the responsibilities you took were stretch for you. And that's, you know, I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow. Actually, I teach a class, or part of a class here at Dell on career development and leadership, and I teach it to the graduate students. And tomorrow, that class is tomorrow, and I give 10 do's and don'ts. And one of the do's is exactly what you said: stretch yourself. And so it's very interesting. And Andrew, you said something earlier on that I think is so profoundly important. You know, and if I were to distill it, it would sound like that you have to be, as a leader, you have to be the living embodiment of the organization you lead. And so, you know, your example of how you became Mr. Coca-Cola. And that's so critical, that we be the living embodiment of the organization that we lead. Moving on, you know, I was talking about my people who inspired me. One of them was my doctoral supervisor. When I got my first administrative position at University of Montreal, I called him. He was in Australia. I called him, you know, his name was Don Espinal. So I said, Don, what would be your advice to a newbie? He was an accomplished administrator himself. So I said, what would be your advice to a newbie? And he said, Deep, I'm going to tell you only one thing. And that is, surround yourself with the brightest people you can find and empower them. And, you know, I found that was a brilliant advice. So, you know, why am I saying that? It's because I feel that, you know, leadership is not a solo sport. It's a team sport. And so you have teams around you. And in your cases, you have had such varied careers, and you've handled such, you know, mega projects in your careers. During those leadership roles, how have you kept your teams inspired to come along that, you know, in that journey and deliver what you needed to deliver as a leader, but you knew that you can't do it on your own. You have to have a team around you. So Cindy, maybe I should start with you this time.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really important, you know, when you think of in the organizational context, there are people that really stand out, right, in the organization. And you see them as being sort of the potential and the future leaders, you know, for tomorrow. And I think what's really important, and it's a responsibility that sits with us as leaders, is to keep an eye on the talent, the quieter talent. And some of the, I would say, greatest leadership I have seen in my career have been those leaders that you least expected, because, you know, the sort of the vocal, the outspoken, the high profile individuals are the ones that get noticed. But as leadership, you know, what are we ensuring that we're able to see sort of the outliers of talent that's out there? I think that's number one. I think going back to what you had, something I'd referred to and you highlight is this idea of stretch. And I think that brings the best out of people. I think it's okay to get a little bit uncomfortable. And that's where the best growth is coming. And I think that's ultimately what inspires people as well, that keeps the retention. Andrew, probably the same thing with Coca-Cola. People at PepsiCo, we stayed there, you know, forever. I mean, the reason I left PepsiCo, I did a little, I was over with TELUS Mobility, but came to China. And I think people just enable this incredible loyalty because of what they're learning, what they're experiencing in an organization. It's because leadership is keeping an eye out collectively on how to really extend the experience, knowledge sharing, and so on. So those are a couple of things that popped to my mind.
And they're good, very effective things to pop into one's mind. And I think we should always keep them top of mind. Andrew, your thoughts on this?
Well, you know, and I think, you know, building on what Cindy said, you know, this is why I, you know, always say leadership is a contact sport. You know, you need to reach out to people. You need to get in touch with people. You need to, look, getting in touch with people and connecting with people, I think that's a really sort of a key attribute for successful leaders. And I'm not just only talking about people that who sort of believe in you. You need to also make people who probably don't believe with you or probably don't agree with you can somehow go along with your idea. And I think that's what politicians probably do a lot. And and I'm sort of reflecting on the way that when I was in Disney, there was a very particularly difficult period for Disney to sort of integrate into the Hong Kong infrastructure, because even though Disney in the US, in Canada, people look at it as a really valuable brand, but here in Hong Kong, particularly among the local politicians, they see you as a American sort of invader. And there were times we actually went through before I was there, they had a lot of difficult time to sort of build the kind of trust and engagement with the local community and local politicians and local government. So there were actually a lot of animosities, towards the company itself here in Hong Kong. If you look at the newspapers, back in the days that it first opened, you probably find a lot of evidence of that. So so something that so this is something that I sort of experienced first time myself, is when you are in a role, when you're put in a role that need you to go out and reach out to people who actually oppose you, how do you do that? How do you sort of build trust and communication with these groups and help them to understand what you're trying to do, and why it is worth their time to see you and listen to you, and why they eventually agree to go along with what you propose. So so that's something that any leaders, I would say, in their journey during their whatever role that you are, that this is something that you must equip and you must learn how to do.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I don't know if others experienced that, but we, for a few seconds, we lost you. I don't know, Cindy, if you felt the same thing, or was it only at my end? Oh,
I could hear Andrew the whole time.
Okay, so it's obviously we need to improve the internet services here at Dalhousie in that case. Listen, let's take that to and take that and focus it on the current situation. Last couple of years have been challenging for everybody around the world. I don't believe there has been any exception. And those who have done well, even they have had challenges, and those who haven't done well, they have had more challenges. And in times like this, there is always that North Star for everybody, always that the compass that points you to the north, your own personal compass. Here at Dell, for example, if I were to think about what was it that kept us pointed in the right direction throughout this very difficult and turbulent period, and is still doing so, and that would be that very early on, within the first hours of the COVID-19 virus arriving here, we made a decision in the senior administration that we are going to focus on, first and foremost, on the health and welfare of our people, and that everything else will come after that. We were prepared, we were modeling, we were doing all the things about that are necessary to prepare for the economic impacts and other impacts of the pandemic. But the first focus was how are we going to keep everybody healthy and alive, and because it looked very scary. You would remember, I mean, coming in, it looked far scarier than it does today, even though it is still scary. But my God, in March 2020, it was a very, very scary thing to be facing. And that kept us focused. And then from there, we took the approach of two things that I would, if I look back, two things stand out for me. That is, number one, clarity, always be clear on communication and always be authentic about it. And, so it was not communication for, contrived communication to keep people calm or whatever. It was authentic and tell the truth and be consistent throughout. That was our compass that kept us pointed north. What was your compass during your journey through this pandemic? Andrew, maybe I should start with you and then we'll go to Cindy.
I got to say, we probably have, few practices when we faced, when we sort of, got into this COVID. And I think the principle that you talk about, Doctor, was they were really, really true. And for us, for myself, one thing that we really focused on was obviously to keep the business surviving. And as you know, the viruses, brought, both opportunities and challenges to different industries. If you talk to a, container shipping company today, they actually, very, very happy. In the last couple of years, they made more money ever. For example, Costco, the Chinese, state-owned container shipping company. Last year they made, about 10 billion yuan, their best year ever. Since the company was found. And now for my industry, obviously it was very different. I'm in the hospitality industry, and the last couple of years, the challenges has been unprecedented. Both in terms of the scales and also in terms of the length of time. And when you're facing with this sort of an event. One thing that I actually talk to our people about is, well, so how do we, what do we do? What do we need to do, in order to keep our business afloat? Because if you look at the statistics, the figures actually tells you, the survival rate, is very, very low. If you are in the restaurant business. If you're in the travel agency business, the survival rate is even lower. Basically you have 0% of to survive. So what we do is that we actually remind ourselves that, hey, look, we don't know how long this thing is going to go on. We don't know, what will happen next. And so what do we do meantime? And what we sort of come to a conclusion is that this is not a sprint. This actually is a marathon. So I guess something that resonate what you said, being consistent, but also being persistent. That you need to keep the team to believe. Hey, there definitely, is a light at the end of the tunnel. We are not there yet, and we probably won't be, for a long time. If you look at the forecast from the airline industry, their forecast is that the whole, global travel business probably won't get back to a pre-COVID situation until 2025. So we're telling ourselves basically, hey, we are probably just in the middle, of this sort of a phase. The virus is still, stop and go on and off. And so how do we sort of prepare, for this very long winter and, be persistent, be resilient, and make sure that, we survive, even 36 months later. So this has been sort of our learning.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. And yes, persistence and marathon. I think those words, they apply equally well to our sector, academic sector as well. Cindy, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the North Stars, I think, you referred to it. So I don't know if the audience knows, but I'm based in mainland China. And so I haven't been able to get to Canada since 2019. And it was interesting. It was around January, the end of January of 2020. And, you know, the pandemic, well, it wasn't even called the pandemic at that point. And our daughter, she's at university in Amsterdam, and she was leaving, and she's like, oh, I'm worried. I'm like, don't be worried. And then my husband, who's also a Dell grad, he does a lot of his work is based in Ethiopia. And he said, should I stay? Should I leave? I said, don't worry. And it was interesting. Our daughter had said something. She said, yeah, but what if you can't get out of China, or I can't get in? And I'm like, no, that's crazy. That will never happen. So as you know, there was the travel ban. And so my point in expressing that is because if you look at the level of uncertainty that we experience here, so many people are unable, they're not connected with their families. We're moving into Chinese New Year, which is going to be, you know, this weekend, and the big day will be on Monday. And so kind of imagine, well, actually, you don't have to imagine, because I know everyone has had a similar experience around Christmas and connecting. But you had touched on something that was really important, and it's about this leadership with compassion. And I think about really addressing sort of the well-being of people. And that's a conversation I think organizations and leadership we're all having even today, because we keep putting a milestone, okay, maybe by the summer or maybe by the spring, you know, which we really don't know. So I think, you know, one of the things I think a lot of people have done well is just taking pause and having a retrospective, and then just calibrating, you know, how do we move forward? And I think that's really important during times of uncertainties. And I think once you have the sense of well-being within the organization, then it's easier to start to address the business. And it's such a balancing act. But I think, you know, the leadership requirements have really changed in the last 3 years of what we expect from leaders, what we expect from ourselves, in particular in leading during these times.
So true. Yeah, so much has changed as a result of this this pandemic, and expectation of leaders is not an exception to that either. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you one more formal question before we go to our viewers. But let me just take a little detour for just a moment and speak to our audience and say, you know, remind you that in perhaps a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask you to send us your questions. What do you have in mind? Any questions for Andrew and Cindy? And of course, you can ask me any question you want, but I will just simply punt it off to Cindy and Andrew, because they seem to be so much better qualified than I am to answer questions on leadership. So please be ready, and you can actually already start posting your questions on chat. And we have Kirsten with us who will read your question, and then we'll see how we handle those. So please be ready, and as I said, go ahead and post a question if you have something in your mind. So with that, let me come back to you, Cindy and Andrew. And you know, you've had such, you know, impressive journeys in your leadership roles, and you continue to contribute so effectively in your current roles. And that, of course, will surely have lessons that you can share with others. So if you were to give advice to others in other organizations particularly about emerging from the pandemic, but also broadly, you know, emerging from other challenges that they might face now or in the future. So what would be that one or two pieces of advice that you would give to others in similar position? Cindy, let me start with you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think oftentimes, you know, as a leader, we expect so much from ourselves and this sense of responsibility. And I think it's really about what I've noticed and what I've experienced is what I call collective leadership, more so than we've ever seen. And it's really about whether it's, dealing, reaching across industries, reaching across, organizations, but having a conversation around how to collectively do that. And I think, in my experience, what I've noticed is those that fared well were really open to having that dialogue, and just sharing with how do we do this. And the other thing too is do not underestimate the capacity and resilience within your own organization. And I think that's something a lot of organizations are very proud of, is being able to see people rallying together. And those leaders that reach out, show empathy, compassion, and vulnerability are the ones that can really connect, and I think have the ability to kind of work through things better than we ever have before. So
well said. Yeah, very well said. Good advice. Excellent advice, actually. Andrew.
Well, I'm going to, speak in the context of our industry. So, if you look at, our business, our industry, basically, you have only a few, giants on the top, such as Disney, such as Universal. And then you have, basically a whole bunch of little guys, across the industry, doing, different things. And obviously, the giants, they are much better, in a much better position to adapt to the current environment. However, the smaller companies, the small, medium-sized companies, they really have a lot of difficulties, going through this crisis. And what I usually, when I meet with, our business partner, certain things that we know, number one, moving forward, we all understand that because, as I said, this is a marathon. We really need to, manage our cost base, manage our expenses, manage our investment, wisely, and at a level that can allow us, to continue long term. In the past, a lot of companies, always, try to, do everything themselves. But now, everyone is sort of realized that, hey, this is an internet age. And there are a lot of stuff that we actually can share. So, how can we actually form a strategic alliance, across the board, among different industry, sharing knowledge and sharing technologies, and even sharing responsibilities. And really, this will allow, all these smaller businesses to sort of offload some of their, prior commitment and be able to move forward together. So, I was talking with a couple, design firms the other days. In the past, their major clients were, giant properties companies. But now, as you know, in China, these giant, properties companies actually are crumbling down. So how do we survive? And what sort of a business can we sort of go into? They have lots of questions like that. So forming alliance will allow us to sort of survive this event together. Second thing, really adapting to new technologies, particularly in the entertainment, the hospitality industry, that we are in. Now, one particular, sort of specific attribute of our business is, this is basically a business that that you create physical, social sort of interaction. And the question for us now is that, so can we, actually move that interaction online? And now there are emerging technologies, such as metaverse, such as AI, such as robotic. Any of these things that actually can sort of enable us to help us to achieve our objective. And how do we move forward to that? So I'll see, after this sort of event or this crisis is over, in a couple more years, the companies, that probably will survive, I will say are those, that can adapt themselves, to new technologies the most. And lastly, it's important that, as a player, as a business or as a company, you also need to realize that you need to create, new demands, because, as you said, the world has changed, because of this, because of a COVID. So how, the question is, how do you actually can lead your customers to create new demands for your business? One thing that I'll say, I learned along the way, in different, companies, it may sound arrogant, but I think, in a way it's also true. Sometimes, your customers, your consumer, they really don't know what they don't know. So you really need to show them, what's actually is possible, what actually are the alternatives, and what actually, you can bring to the table that's completely, totally different, than before. I think, now, after this, 2 years, and now we're coming up to 3 years, of COVID, a lot of consumer behaviors actually has changed. And so, not only that, you need to recognize and accept those changes. And you need to recognize that, these changes are probably, will stay, forever, because the world is changed. And which actually brings to what you need to do. So in terms of what you need to do, is that, you have to be your own force of disruption. This event disrupted your business, but at the same time, you also need to create your own disruption, to transform your business. So these are the things that, within our conversation, I think these are the common things that we talk about within our industry.
That between the comments from the two of you, there's this wealth of golden nuggets that you could pass on to others. And let me add, this one is not quite a golden nugget, because golden nuggets seldom come from me, but it's just one of the personal beliefs that I want to share with any others who may be, listening and thinking about these things. And that is, as a leader, don't forget about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your body and your mind are the only medium through which you interact with the rest of the world. And you are not going to be very effective if you forget about yourself and don't look after yourself. So in times of crisis, that is one thing that often falls by the wayside, that we forget about ourselves and we don't look after ourselves. And I think that's so critical, that we keep ourselves in good shape for the hard work that needs to be done on behalf of the organizations and institutions we lead. With that, let me ask Kirsten if there are any questions for Cindy and Andrew and for me.
Yes, for sure. I will start that we have 2 great comments, so I'm going to read those first. So it says, thanks, Dalhousie President Dr. Saini, for great moderating of the questions, and also for the personal experience riches that Cindy and Andrew are sharing with us today. So that was our first. And our second was, thanks for a great conversation, wishing all, including but not limited to those who celebrate the Lunar New Year, a happy, healthy, and prosperous Lunar New Year and a better year in 2022. So I will start with a question from one of our viewers. And Andrew, it goes back to the theme that you were discussing at the beginning of the conversation regarding leveraging challenging situations that can strengthen future leadership focus. So the question is, based on these challenges, should future focus be more on developing partnerships, projects in China, or diversifying externally to Asia and the world? What future opportunities do you see?
Okay. Well, now, if we're talking about China and perhaps even regionally, within our industry, within our businesses, obviously, this is a time that I would say there a new order will probably emerge in a couple of years' time. And given the the rate of change, as well as the adaptation of the new technologies within this industry, the obvious steps moving forward are really about partnerships and really about forming effective alliance. That how do you help others, and how can other people actually help you, and how do we leverage what we have and contribute what we have, and also very important thing is how do you keep a really open mind about a different approach that you probably need to take in order to to move forward for your business. And I'll say this is a really interesting time because there are many folds, not only because of the COVID. I think the geopolitical situation is also coming into play, particularly within this region, so besides this what we said about technologies, a different way of thinking about your business, forming alliance, reaching out, is is also to consider consider that how do you overcome a bit of a challenge with the geopolitical situation. And the reason I'm quoting geopolitical factor is because it has a very tangible impact on on businesses. The way that the U.S. is banning technologies, knowledge, or or building up trade barriers with China. It has a real impact on how we operate on ground, and and so now how do we overcome that? I don't really have an answer, but I guess it is more about how do you adapting to this new different environment.
So Kirsten, I just want to do a time check here that we got a couple of minutes to go. So let's try and run through another question if we can.
Yeah, I will. So the last question I'll go with is, how do you inspire as a leader when you yourself are overwhelmed or uninspired?
Cindy, why don't you take that?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And I think, it's a question that a lot of leaders have experienced. And even I would say there were points during the past 3 years, might have felt it myself. Dr. Saini, you talked about something about well-being. And I think it's really about considering our own well-being. I have to share with everyone. So it was in January and I posted something, this is 2020, I posted something on Facebook. And so I graduated in 1984, and there's a group of about 20 plus of us, all Dell grads, that stay in touch every single year. And one of the things the group did is they reached out to me and they said, Cindy, how are you doing? And I think, sort of having the resiliency is built around surrounding yourself with people who you care for, who can support you, and take time, take pause, because I think that is becoming a big issue, organizational issue, economic issue is around the mental well-being in all different perspectives. And I think from once you are feeling well and once you have the support, then it's so important to pause and take time and really listen to what the organization, what people are sharing. And I think that brings a lot of strength from that. So that was a nice question.
Excellent question to end with, and equally excellent answer to end with. Thank you, Cindy and Andrew. Thank you, both of you, for spending an hour with us and for sharing your insights with us and all of us. By us, I mean everybody who's listening on. Before we close, let me wish everybody a happy Lunar New Year. Let me also wish the end of this pandemic so we can begin to meet in person. I'm looking forward to meeting as many of you in person as the opportunity permits, and especially Cindy and Andrew. I know that I will be traveling to China before long, as soon as travel becomes more convenient. So I know that our paths will definitely cross. So with that, let me say thank you to everybody who has joined us today. It's been a great conversation, and I do hope that you will you have not only found this inspiring, but that you will continue this kind of conversation within your own organizations. Thank you, and all the best to you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.